problems didn't allow us to continue our interview, but thankfully she agreed to make time for it today. And again, my apologies to the audience for yesterday's inconvenience, but at least here we are now. And so let's all welcome Hiral to HAPS and to the Snakeman's Lair as well. Thank you so much for being here, Hiral, and making time for it, even despite the mess that happened, not least because of my fault.
No problem. Sometimes the internet just doesn't work when you want it to.
Okay, yeah, I really should stop confiding in technology at this point. I don't even know why I still have faith. Okay, now existential dread aside, let's go to the real deal. So, Hiral, as I said yesterday when I introduced you quite extensively, because we were waiting for the connection to resume working, so I had time to say quite a few things on your account. So you are an ecologist. You graduated with an MSc in ecology from the University of Witwatersrand, if I remember correctly. And if I pronounce it correctly, which is also something I should have asked in advance, perhaps.
Good job.
And so and your main interest has always, at least always since I know of your work, has always been about snakes. So you have been focusing on snake ecology throughout your research career, and living in South Africa perhaps proved to be a great advantage in that sense, because you have quite a lot of snakes, at least for what I know. So exactly what did your research, your MSc research consist of mainly, before we go into the snakebite, into your complementary snakebite work?
Sure. So my master's focused on the evolution of diet in a snake family called the Lamprophidae. And for my research, I was looking at specific factors that have kind of influenced this evolution of diet within the snake family.
So evolution of diet. So in that sense, what exactly were the main it's been a really tough day, everybody. I apologize again. My English has been letting me down for longer than I thought it would. So let me rephrase, erase and rewind. Okay, so back on it. So you investigated the evolution of diet in the Lamprophidae, which are quite an interesting snake family, actually, because they have all the types of dentition you can possibly think of. Like they have front fangs, rear fangs, no fangs, basically anything. And so how does that reflect in what they eat in their dietary ecology?
So I recently published a paper looking at exactly how the fang morphology influences the real diversity in diet, or rather vice versa. I think you can probably look at it both ways. The diversity in diet, including things like everything from a very generalist diet. You need to have specific dentition to be able to exploit that kind of prey. Whereas if you're preying on something very specific, something like slugs and snails, you don't really need to have fangs, because you're going to swallow that prey completely. And so throughout the family has or previously had close to 315 species. So there's quite a lot of different species, and they all have this huge variation in diet. And similarly, it's reflected in the different kind of dentition they have as well.
Mm. Oh yeah, that's also a very interesting point, because like I sometimes I have the impression that what we mainly know about snake feedings is basically limited to two modes of prey restraint or prey handling, which are constriction and envenomation. But yeah, again, the lamprophits perhaps are a great example that there is so much more than that, because again, a lot of snakes don't neither constrict nor use venom. So how do they? And for some type of prey, neither of those would be effective. So um, how adaptable, how versatile are snakes in that sense? So did you see any like specific dietary adaptations that prompted snakes to handle one particular type of prey completely differently than they would any other?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the slugs and snails, you have a specific group. They're of the genera Duberia, and these snakes specifically feed on slugs and snails. And what they do is they extract the prey from its shell. I think it has a specific dentition, if I remember correctly. And so it uses this tooth to basically pull the slug out of its the snail out of its shell, which is really remarkable. And then you have this other group, the Atractaspids, which for the common name for those of you that don't know is the stiletto snakes. So these are really interesting snakes because they've got sort of side stabbing fangs. They're highly venomous, and they've got this huge diversity in diet. And what most people don't know is that they're also fossorial. So it's very likely that their lifestyle of living underground has facilitated this need to have fangs, but kind of side stabbing fangs.
Oh yeah, so because yeah, they don't have that much room to open their mouth underground, so they have to like stab their prey from the side. Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah.
That's just insane. And also, I mean, I've never even seen an Atractaspid in real life, although I would love to. But I've heard that they are really a pain to handle, because again, you can't grab them behind the neck, because they can just take out their fangs and stab your fingers. So yeah, that's also. I don't know. It always blew my mind. I don't even know why, but wow.
Yeah.
And yeah, so now we have talked a bit about what you worked on, but then again, someone might wonder, yeah, but why do we need to know like what snakes eat and how they hunt? Because I mean, of course, yeah, some snakes are venomous, some snakes are dangerous and anything, but how does knowledge of their feeding ecology help us in even from a medical perspective, like to prevent snake bite and um, minimize human snake conflict?
Sure. So that's a really interesting question. I'd say, it's very different. Like for my master's, I focused on species that were they're not really the dangerous or dangerous, so to speak. They are mostly non-venomous, but often they come across as dangerous in people's homes, just because people are just scared of all these different things. So the primary reason why we need to understand diet and obviously its relationship to the fangs is so that we can then kind of create an understanding of how species fit into the ecosystem. Also, what's become very clear is that all these different snakes, even if they're back-fanged or rear-fanged rather, they have really important venom. So they might produce venom in small amounts, so it's not dangerous, harmful to humans. but those venoms are very likely to be made up of proteins that are really important in creating different types of medicine.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, they have great potential for biodiscovery, and that's perhaps something that I feel sometimes this could be one of the most effective arguments to advocate for venomous snake conservation, because with some literally life-saving drugs have already in the market come from snake venom components, and even cosmetics, which could be even more effective, perhaps. So yeah, that's that's definitely a great point to make, and thank you for mentioning it. And yes, now that I think about it, perhaps for our audience, it would be good to clarify like what we mean exactly by rear fanged or front fanged. So what does that mean in terms of venom delivery systems, and how and fang morphology in snakes?
Sure. So I'm not sure if you've actually talked about the different, groups before, but you obviously get your vipers, which have these front rotating fangs. And I'm butchering the explanation here, but what you need to know is that vipers need to be able to open their mouths completely so they can envenomate their prey and then release. Then you get most of your elapids, which have front fixed fangs, things like your Black Mamba. And they will often, envenomate their prey and then consume their prey. Rare fanged species have fangs on the back of their mouth. So something like a boomslang, and something like a vine snake. And these species have fangs at the back of their mouth. And similarly, a lot of traditionally non-venomous snakes have fangs at the back of their mouths as well. But because they don't produce as harmful venom as some of the other species, they're almost considered to be not as harmful to humans. Their main function is for prey subjugation.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you for the clarification, Hiral. And also, the what you said about like supposedly harmless rear fang snakes that actually are not harmless at all. Like you mentioned the boomslang and the vine snake, which now we know are both potentially deadly venomous, but for a long time, even up to the 60s, even professional herpetologists thought they were nearly harmless, because they are rear fangs, so they can't be that big of a deal. But now we know better, not least because some prominent herpetologists have succumbed to bites from those species, and so at that point it became impossible to ignore how truly powerful their venoms are. And so now you also mentioned some of the like most famous like venomous snakes from native to your home country, to South Africa, like the Black Mamba or the boomslang. So now I would like to use this to introduce the other, so to say, the other component of your work, which is your activism for human snake conflict mitigation. And I would like to start by complimenting you, first of all, for having been nominated one of the women's champions for Snakebite by Health Action International and the Lillian Lincoln Foundation. So first of all, congratulations for that. You are one of the of the women who have been chosen among for Africa to represent the fight against snakebite. And so, first of all, what are we exactly talking about when we say snakebite? Because of course, we know that people can die after being bitten by snakes, but what proportions, what numbers are we talking about? Like what kind of impact are we talking about, especially in regions like sub-Saharan Africa where you work?
Sure. So for those of you that don't know, snakebite was declared a neglected tropical disease in 2017. It used to be on the list before that. I think it got removed in 2013. But because people have been dying across the world because of snakebite, they needed to declare it a neglected tropical disease so that we could spend a lot more money, time, and labor into understanding what is actually happening. So in sub-Saharan Africa, hundreds of thousands of people are bitten yearly. It is pretty bad in the tropical areas, so Central and East Africa, and in Southern Africa, or South Africa specifically, I'll say that it hasn't been as bad. And one of the biggest reasons for this is that we've got really good healthcare systems, which goes to prove that this is a huge influence in the way that we're treating snakebite and how we need to be treating snakebite across the world, especially in areas that are most vulnerable. And most often what happens when people are bitten by a venomous snake is that it takes them really long to get to any kind of medical facility, either a clinic or a hospital. And then the other issue is that at the hospital or a clinic, they don't have anti-venom, which is a whole different topic, because producing anti-venom is really expensive. And trying to get it to these different remote locations is a completely different task altogether.
Oh yeah, so yeah, then yeah, that definitely makes sense, because yeah, again, if you can get access to appropriate healthcare and have anti-venom administered to you in time, then actually your odds of surviving are pretty good. Like I say, even like, yeah, you see a lot of urban legends like circulating around that if a black mamba bites you, you have like 101% chance to die. But that is like even without medical treatment, that is not true. So if the medical treatment is there, then your odds are pretty good. So yeah, that can truly make a huge difference.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the case.
And yeah, so you said that in South Africa, thankfully the snakebite situation isn't that bad compared to other regions, but still, when it comes, still, yeah, there are, as we said, there are plenty of dangerously venomous snakes in South Africa. And so, what species are more often come in conflict with humans? Well, which species are responsible for the highest number of bites in South Africa, and why, maybe?
Sure. So I'll mention something just before that. I think one of the biggest things in South Africa is that we also, a lot of snake bites do get reported because hospitals and doctors here readily, either publish their data. But that being said, I think there's a lot of snake bites that go unreported, particularly in rural areas. And I think that's the most important thing that we need to understand. And that's where I come in. My goal is to kind of understand in which rural areas people are getting bitten, and where it's not being reported. So coming back to your question, so I'll mention three of the biggest snakes that contribute towards a lot of our snake bites. Puff adders, these are very ambush foraging snakes. Sorry, I was just looking for the term. These are ambush foraging snakes. They're really camouflaged, and most often people get bitten by the snake because they either try to go and kill it towards its head, and it's got a really fast strike. The other snake is a Mozambique spitting cobras. Often these snakes are found in people's houses. Another very interesting behavior that I hope to kind of understand. And so Mozambique spitting cobras and puff adders have cytotoxic venom. And then the other snake that is often encountered is the Black Mamba, which has neurotoxic venom. There is another snake, the Cape cobra, which is also a big contributor in terms of snake bites. But because it's not interacted with as often as I'd say something like the Black Mamba or spitting cobras, they don't feature as commonly in snakebite.
And yeah, since you mentioned the Mozambique spitting cobra, which, as the name suggests, is a spitting cobra indeed. So it spits, it can spray venom, not only bite but also spray venom as a form of as a defense strategy. So squirt venom in the eyes of a potential aggressor. So how does that compare to how frequent that is, at least to your knowledge, in South Africa, and how does that get treated, like compared to a bite? Like if you get venom, cobra venom in your eyes, what consequences can you expect, and how can you avoid them, pretty much?
Sure. So the spitting cobras primarily show defense by spitting. So if a Mozambique spitting cobra spits in your eyes, it's really important to wash it out with water. If you don't have water, you can wash it out with something like milk. But it's important to remember that milk has fat in it, and so it can cause the venom to stick around for longer. So we recommend that you go straight into the shower, spray your eye or wash your eyes out for at least 20 minutes to get that venom out. If we where I work at the snake park, we have a saying that nothing is better than water, but get anything that you can.
Yeah, and that's kind of like washing your eyes for 20 minutes straight, just to get out the venom, because if you don't, then you said indeed that the cytotoxins can seriously damage the eyes to the point of blindness in most severe cases. Because that's definitely something you don't want in your eye. But then again, you said, now you mentioned that you briefly mentioned your partnership with the Hutzpaht Reptile Centre in Limpopo, which is on the northeast, in the northeastern corner of South Africa, if I recall correctly. I was there long ago. Apologies for my memory. What exactly? How did this collaboration come to be, and what role do you have at the Reptile Center at the moment?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I work for an organization called Save the Snakes. And at the beginning of last year, in 2020, I'd applied for this grant to start a project, just looking at education and outreach in schools. It was around about the same time that some friends of mine actually took over had bought the snake park, and they were looking for collaborators. Now Hutzpaht is kind of the perfect place to do a snake education and outreach project, because it's quite remote. There's a huge diversity of snakes here. And it seemed like the best kind of partnership to start up. And so I contacted my friends, said, cool, I've got this grant from the International herpetological symposium, and I would love to start some kind of education and outreach program. And so from there, at the beginning of this year, we officially started our project. It's called the Snake Education and Community Awareness Program, CCAP. And the goal of the program is really to go to different schools, educate learners about snakes, but also go to rural communities and, try and mitigate human-snake conflict, create a relationship with these people to understand why having snakes in our environment is important. Another important component of our program is also working very closely with hospitals and clinics in the area so that we can understand how, healthcare workers have previously treated snakebite, have, kind of attempted and failed. We're trying to understand what has been done and how we can improve it through our knowledge and, creating a better understanding of how snakes can fit into our ecosystems without being harmed.
Oh yeah, that's also a great point to mention. And indeed, I was going to ask you about that, in the sense that indeed, human snake conflict is not only about treating people who get the people who get bitten, but also reducing the incidence of bites in the first place. And for that, indeed, your work initiatives like yours are, I believe, are extremely important, because they can really minimize the risk of people interacting with snakes in a way that facilitates bites. So so far, like from what you've experienced so far, like how receptive have people in the Hutzpaht area been? How receptive have they been towards like changing perhaps their attitude towards snakes, like from what I presume was fear or even contempt to a more tolerant perspective?
Sure. We've had really mixed behavior. I'd say we have a lot of people that do really like snakes and enjoy having them around. But then you get a lot of people that are also very scared of snakes. And we try to actively engage with them in trying to understand, where that fear comes from. And then, starting small by allowing them to interact with a non-venomous snake, and then educating them a little bit more about how snakes can benefit the environment, and how, keeping them in our environment allows us to maintain population control of rats and mice. And I think people are, it's sometimes it's a bit slow with some people. With others, it's almost, I guess, almost immediate in this kind of way that they want to learn more. Some people obviously they still have this fear, but one of the biggest things is that they still want to learn more about snakes, and that changes everything.
Oh yeah, that's definitely comforting to hear, because again, sometimes it's hard to see the light in a problem such as snakebite, which as you described, is plaguing so many people in the world, and even in your area in your area as well. So and in this sense, like you mentioned, that it's, of course, it varies between people of how receptive they are to outreach and education efforts. And since you also mentioned like initiatives that are tailored towards kids, and especially younger teenagers or kids, I was wondering how important do you think it is to start when they are very young, like to start like educating them about also the how dangerous snakes can be, but mostly why we shouldn't fear or hate them.
I think it's absolutely important to start at a really young age. Kids are very receptive from a really young age, and the more time people spend in nature, the more interested they become in a lot of the animals and species that live within that environment. And a lot of children have the power to influence their parents' minds as well. So by starting with kids that are already kind of interested, that are already learning about so many other animals that live in the environment and their importance, adding in snakes into that kind of global perspective of why all animals are important, why biodiversity as a whole is important, doesn't make them look at snakes in a negative light. And I think that's absolutely important when they go home and tell these stories to their parents, because now you're not looking at an animal that has very traditionally been looked at in a negative light. They look at it in a much more positive light. Sometimes it does take a while to make change happen, but I do believe that kids have the power to do so much. I mean, we've encountered kids that are really snake ambassadors. They want to keep learning more about what snakes are doing, why, and they have so many questions. It's so exciting to work with them because of that interest, that curiosity that they have. And I think that's the most important reason why working with kids is important.
Well, yeah, it definitely can work. Sometimes it definitely works better with kids than adults, indeed. And it also, yeah, like you said, gives much more like future hope for the future in that sense, because yeah, these hopefully those kids will grow up to be like more mindful to the problem of snake bite, but also to snakes themselves, because like again, like you said, snakes too are suffering a lot from conflict with humans, because they get killed and displaced, even when they are even non-venomous ones, perhaps. So how? Oh wait, I think the connection fell again. Okay, no, you're back. Whew, thank God. All right. Yeah. So I was saying, yeah. So about snake identification, correct identification of snakes. Like you said, that in the Hutzpaht area there is an amazing diversity of snake species. So how do you approach the issue of like instructing people on how to identify them when they come across one of them, because they look so different from one another that it can be sometimes daunting to think of like how to recognize each and every one of them.
Sure. So, I mean, first and foremost, we recommend that if anybody finds a snake, don't touch it. Even if you know that it's non-venomous, just leave it alone. And then at the Hutzpaht Reptile Centre, we're always available to assist in any way. So if anybody, finds a snake and they need an ID or anything, they just give us a call, explain what they're seeing, what color the snake is, or they can take a picture of it. Most often you can keep a safe distance when taking a picture. We don't recommend going close to take a picture. We do understand that obviously for proper identification, we do need something close up. But I think the biggest thing is that if a snake is not doing any harm in anybody's house or in their backyard, the snake is most likely to go away. So, I think in an area where I am currently in Hutzpaht, a lot of people do know their snakes. There are lots of different posters that have been published things like by the African Snakebite Institute. And these are posters that we have shared, and it's important to be able to do that. One of the biggest things that we will also be doing, part of our CCAP project, is creating identification posters that we can then leave with schools, we can leave with communities, we can also leave at hospitals and clinics. And so people will then be able to identify specifically what they're seeing, not just by looking at the head of a snake, but understanding what certain snakes are doing in specific environments. And then, yeah, based on that, it's a lot easier to narrow down what snake they've most likely found.
Oh yeah, and this also ties back to what we were discussing, like at the start of the interview, like you're working in snake ecology, because like even now it's also important to know like why snakes would be attracted to populated areas, like to homes or yards or anything. Like why would they get close to human environments? So what attracts them, what brings them closer to humans? So what do you think is the reason for that? Like why do people find so many, at least in certain areas, so many snakes around their homes?
If I'm being completely honest, the Hutzpaht area specifically, I mean, houses are built around the bush. Even something like a wildlife estate. So a wildlife estate is a combination of basically a natural bush with a variety of housing within that bush environment, where you're likely to see things like warthogs and your different species of antelope. And so this is a snake's natural environment. You can't expect a snake to not exist in that environment. And the reason why most often it's going to come into your home is either you have, rats and mice, or it's looking for any other kind of food. We also find that sometimes when people keep homes that are very untidy, there's just something everywhere. It's a really great hiding spot for snakes, because often large predators such as different types of birds prey on snakes. And so, if it has a good hiding space in a house, then it's very likely to go there.
Oh yeah, indeed. This is something I was hoping you'd mention, that yeah, snakes don't know what private property means, basically. So and again, you said you can't expect them not to exist where their original habitat was. And yeah, since you were talking about wildlife estate, indeed, I was thinking since the time I was in Hutzpaht 3 years ago, that yeah, Hutzpaht is basically right next to Kruger National Park, where a lot of foreign tourists travel to as well, and they go there to see like lions or leopards, like the big five, or other like charismatic animals. But like, at least do you have an idea like what is the perception of snakes from the point of view of a tourist who at least allegedly travels to South Africa to see wildlife, but then yeah, snakes don't really feature much in the whole promotion campaign for wildlife at all. So how do these things relate?
Yeah, that's quite an interesting question. I would say that a lot of tourists that do come have I think I'll say a healthier perception of snakes, and I think it's because in the Western world, in the Western Hemisphere, you don't really look at snakes in such a negative light as very many other more rural countries, I'd say. And the reason why I say this is that, I think a lot of tourists that do come here, although they're looking specifically, they come here wanting to see things like the elephants and giraffes and your big cats. I think we as people that work on snakes, we don't really use that as a way to lure people in, because honestly, there's very little that you can portray with snakes in comparison to the big megafauna. And by this I mean, like, it's very cool to go to a snake park and see all these cool reptiles doing what they're doing. But it's very difficult when you're competing with a lion trying to chase a waterbuck, around the Kruger National Park. So it's constantly a challenge. But I think it's getting better over the years. I think the perception of snakes globally is starting to change, and it works in our benefit, because now we're trying to, create them or showcase them in a light that's, more fitting within the environment, within the ecosystem. So people can relate to them a lot more, rather than thinking about these snakes that, just want to chase you. I mean, that's complete myth.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. Like the whole, but then again, something that you hear quite often, at least in the case of South Africa, about the Black Mamba, which is the species I had in mind perhaps most prominently when I asked you this question, because this is an extremely famous snake. Like you see it in Kill Bill, like you see, like Kobe Bryant was proudly called himself the Black Mamba, just when he was like breaking records all over the place in basketball. So a lot of people know about it, and of course quite a lot of the information that circulates about the Black Mamba is myths, like the chasing people thing, and the two pacer stuff as well. But I was thinking, since 2 years ago we had a symposium called Venomous Snakes as Flagship Species, and as much as perhaps it would be like utopistic to think of a venomous snake as a cash cow species for conservation, perhaps, do you think that maybe for some snakes at least there would be potential for to use them, so to say, as a tourist attraction, rather instead of just a material for fear mongering?
Sure. I think there is potential. I think this is why understanding snake ecology is really important, because then what we could design is something where tourists can come and visit a location, but you're now observing an animal that's in its natural environment. You don't interact with it, you simply observe it from a behavioral point of view. And that's exactly what you would do if you saw an elephant in the wild. You won't go disturb it, you won't interact with it, you'll simply observe it and watch it, going about its daily behavior. So yes, I think we could certainly do something like that. I think it's important to then be able to find these snakes in the first place, and then kind of create observation tourist experiences.
Yeah, I would definitely be down for that, but I might be just a little bit biased, so that's that's something I have to admit it, because especially mambas, I absolutely adore them. And yeah, just before my last question, I would like to remind everyone in the audience that if you have any questions yourself for Hiral, just write them down in the comment section so that we will cover them. At least, yeah, Hiral will answer to you if you ask. So there is no right or wrong. Just anything that you might want to know about snakes and snake bites, or anything that Hiral's words made you think about. So feel free to basically throw anything at us. All right, and then Hiral, one last question that I have for you is perhaps a bit more personal, because like you're a herpetologist and you are devoting your life to studying snakes and their interaction with people. And yeah, it has happened to me quite often when I told people that I study snakes too, and I mentioned some female colleagues of mine. They were like, "What? There are girls who do this too?" Yes, and the very fact that it's so insane to believe is quite a bit of a problem, if I can be completely honest with you. So, what was your experience like, making your way into a traditionally male-dominated field and establishing yourself as well, I would say a renowned herpetologist by now, despite your young age?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think, and I was recently on the Squamates podcast where I explained my journey into herpetology. And one of the biggest things is that I've always been someone that has been very driven and ambitious, and so I've kept pushing through. So even working in the herpetology field, I've personally never felt like I was different. I also never thought of myself as different. I've always thought of myself as someone that can achieve whatever I want to do, despite what other people might think. And I think that's really important when you want to pursue a career that might traditionally be very male dominated. And along the way, sure, I think there were a lot of people that questioned, like, okay, what is it that you're doing? But I wouldn't say that I've been I've received any negative criticism regarding working in herpetology. So I've been very lucky. I've been pretty accepted on a very global scale, which I also really appreciate. I think it's within the herpetology community, people are very accepting. And when you have a passion for something, and when people can see that you are going to work towards making that, whatever goals you have, accomplishable, then I don't think anybody really doubts you. I will talk about one interesting experience that I had. I think 2 months ago or so, I went with my colleagues to rescue a python from somebody's home. And some of the workers there, watched me carry this 2.5 meter python, 3 meter python with my colleague. And they were just looking at me as though, like, how can a woman do this? And, they're like, oh, wow, okay, you can catch snakes. By the way, that snake rescue is on the Save the Snakes YouTube channel if you want to go check it out.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And female colleagues that have received the same kind of, I would say, attention, like, oh, okay, you're a woman and you catch snakes. Is that normal? But when you do it with the purpose of education, with the purpose of just doing what you do, you don't feel that you're different, and I think that's the most important thing. As a woman working in a field that has very traditionally been male dominated, I think it's important to stay strong to who you are. There's no need to kind of prove anything, because you have nothing to prove, because you're doing exactly what you're meant to be doing.
Oh well, thank you for this message, Hiral. I think a lot of people will be relieved to hear that indeed it's not as impossible as sometimes sometimes it makes some people make it look like for a woman to have a career in herpetology. And we have a question from Andrea Pozzi, who, he definitely doesn't ask easy questions, so to say. I mean, he's a friend of mine, a fellow herpetologist, and he really knows a lot about, well, pretty much everything reptile related. So yeah, he's asking, do you think that in order to reduce the snakebite burden, it's more important to tackle the ecological side of things like venom variation or habitat use, or the political and social side of the issue?
So I think it's really important to focus on the ecological aspects. They have very traditionally been neglected. I'm not saying that the social and political side have not been neglected, but I think it requires partnership between people that work in both sectors, which is why I think the program that we're running in South Africa is so important, because we're going to be working directly with these people. There's no middleman. We want to engage with these people to understand what they have faced, so that we can engage with the government on some kind of level, right? And my PhD research focuses specifically on understanding snakebite in different ways. So, understanding how snakebite has been reported throughout the country, but also understanding the behavior of venomous snakes and what they're doing. And I think this is really important when we can apply to other parts of the continent. So in parts of Central Africa where, snakebite is really an issue, it's important to understand what venomous snakes are currently in the area, what they're doing on a regular basis, and under what circumstances people are getting bitten. Once we understand that, we can then create preventative measures. We can work with the community, and then be able to go directly to government officials, to the policy level, where we can then start to make sort of a more global change.
All right. I hope Andrea will be satisfied with as satisfied with this answer as I am personally. And since there are no more questions, I think it's, well, yeah. I'm pretty sure Andrea is good. Is good with the Andrea is satisfied, as judging from his reply. So yeah, I think since there are no more questions, it's I would like to close this interview by once again thanking you so much, Hiral, for being here today, and bringing once again our attention to the topic of the global snakebite crisis, and especially your personal work on this matter in South Africa. So thank you for this, and best of luck for your work. I'm looking forward to reading more of your research in the near future. And thank you to everyone in the audience who tuned in today. And my apologies again for not being able to broadcast the interview yesterday. I promise you, I will make sure this doesn't happen again in the future. And I hope to see you next week with for the next episode of the Snakeman's Lair, which will air on May 19th. And my guest will be American restoration ecologist and herpetologist Nicholas McCartney. So I hope to see you here next week for the next episode of the Snakeman's Lair. Thank you again, and goodbye.
Thank you so much for